Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Recreation, Open Spaces and Environment Committee. We normally start with public session, but we have some news that we need to pass on as well, and therefore that item I will read out now. It's with sadness that I have to inform you that Richard Hare, who had been with the grounds team for the past 2 years, sadly passed away over the weekend. We send our condolences both as this committee and of the council to Richard's family and friends, and also our own grounds team as well, who've worked with him for the last 18 months. We hope that in time he will be remembered as one of the contributors to the grounds team and the way that the town has looked for the last 18 months. Okay, so we go on to public session. So is there anything you want to say, Mike? Or
No, you said it all. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll go on to public session then. As always, we allow members of the public to make any contributions to tonight's agenda. We will be 3 minutes each, if possible, please. So are there any members of the public that do wish to make any contribution to tonight's meeting? No? Okay. Bree, can you make me co-host so I can see when Piers raises his hand or not? Because I can't at the moment.
I will have to alert you to that, Tim,
okay,
because I haven't got the option to do that, I'm afraid.
Or Piers, you could unmute your video and wave your hand if you need to, but we shall carry on. John, do you want to make the proposal that we bring the item about the wildflowers up to the top of the agenda so Mariko, who is our botanist, can take we can go into that item straight away?
Quite happy to do that. I'll propose. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favour of bringing that up to? I can't see any. Yes. Piers? Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, happy.
Thank you, George. Right, so we'll do apologies first, which we don't have. No?
No, it's a full house tonight.
And any declarations of interest by any members? Again, I'm seeing nothing, so we shall go to item 9, the wildflower verges. Bree, do you want to speak to this?
I can do, yes. Thank you, Tim. I'm just pulling up the report now, item number 9. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to Mariko White. We're very privileged to have Mariko with us this evening. Mariko, she will introduce herself in a moment, but she's a botanist and works for the Dorset Wildlife Trust, and she's an active member of Open Spaces Group and has offered her support with our aspirations to become a town that is wildflower friendly, shall we say. So in summary, there was a group of representatives that met online 2 weeks ago, and at that point we were able to look at what's working within the trial and what we could do better. And it was at that point that Mariko came up with lots of options to try and help us to look at what we can do better to continue to present a wildflower offer, but also to focus on the importance of developing our aims in terms of biodiversity. At that meeting, there were representatives from the Open Spaces Group, Planet Shaftesbury, and also we had feedback from Shaftesbury and Bloom, so groups that were fully representative of the community. So what we're bringing to you tonight is essentially an indicative plan, and we want to get the views of the committee in terms of then how we then develop that plan going forward. and I'm going to ask Mariko just to give the committee an overview of wildflowers. You'll all be aware that we were intending to meet last night, but because of the weather we've had to postpone. But I'm sure Mariko will be able to bring it all to life for you and is far more knowledgeable than I am on this subject. So over to you, Mariko.
Thank you, Bru, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, so I mean, effectively, we know that everyone loves seeing those wildflowers on the verges, that you've had loads of good feedback about how lovely they look. But one of the really important things, and something that's often missed, is there's sometimes a disconnect between what looks good to people and what's actually doing good for the environment, for wildlife, for insects. And those kind of brightly coloured verges, although they look lovely, they're often quite limited in value for insects. So things like butterflies, bees, you know, they'll provide nectar, they'll provide a splash of colour, and they'll attract insects to come and feed on the nectar. But insects need so much more than just a quick sugar rush, really, you know. And there's so many of our lovely grassland butterflies will feed on grasses and other small native wild plants as caterpillars. And you've got to think about the whole life cycle. If you're going to help butterflies, you can't just feed adults. That's going to do sort of nothing really in the scheme of things. You've got to provide that habitat for the larval stages, for them to safely pupate over winter and emerge in the summer and spring as adults. And that's what, you know, those sort of non-native colourful seed mixes don't provide. When you're clearing the ground, sowing annual mixes, there's no continuity of habitat. There's no, you know, full life cycle support for the ecosystem, really. It's just a splash of colour and a bit of nectar in the summer. So I think, given that the Wildflower Verge project, you know, was part of the town council's commitment within the sort of climate strategy and biodiversity strategy, it's really important to make sure that it actually is contributing to benefits for biodiversity, for wildlife, rather than just being, you know, it looks good, but it's not actually doing that much. And so, yeah, I hope that sort of moving forward, it's possible to get something that's going to be ticking all of those boxes, really. So hopefully it will look good, but also, you know, so people will enjoy seeing it, but also will know it's actually really making a difference.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mariko. There might be some questions in a moment. So essentially what we agreed as a stakeholder group a couple of weeks ago was there was a need to look at all of the verges that are within the Shaftesbury vicinity. Majority of those are owned by Dorset Council and managed by Shaftesbury Town Council, and to essentially zone up the town into 6 different zones where we can ask our volunteer groups to go out and survey what verges are suitable for wildflower development, which verges we feel need to be kept manicured in order to protect the visibility splays, and which verges are suitable for a hybrid between the two. So you'll see in your papers an example of zone 1, which we've just extracted, which is essentially the template that we will use to be able to go out and assess the suitability of each of the different types of verges. The aim then is, once that's done, we will then bring that back to the Rose Committee, and we will then develop the policy as per the papers that are in front of you and that you will have had the opportunity, hopefully, to have looked at. So instead of actually moving forward with this, it felt prudent to bring the idea to the committee, to get your views, to get your blessing, for us to go out and then do the wider piece of work and bringing all of this together. The good news is that right from the concept, we have involved Dorset Council, and the senior ranger at Dorset Council has offered us his full support and has also committed to us being able to use the Dorset Council signposting so that the public can see a joined up messaging message, which then eliminates any ambiguity. So that's essentially where we're at. Mariko and I, between us, I'm sure we'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. You'll see on the resolution or the recommendation, what we're asking you to do is to consider the options that are outlined in your papers, and for us to get the green light to proceed with developing the content for a detailed action plan to include the development of the longer term wildflower policy for Shaftesbury.
Thank you, Bree. I see your hand up here. Just want to say, firstly, I don't recommend for us as a committee today to go into the minutiae detail of which verges and what we would like. I don't think that the committee actually should get involved to that degree. What we're being asked to do this evening is to just endorse that plan, or not, as the case may be, and then let, under the scheme of delegation, let the work be done in the background. And then, are you hoping to get back for September's meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan, members.
I'm not sure we will have been able to survey all of the verges in the town, but we'll certainly be looking at doing verge 1 by zone 1 by September.
Excellent. At least we'll then have a plan, and you'll know how long it's going to take per segment, if you like, to get through that whole exercise. So, Piers, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I've still got some questions. Can I confirm, because you know what they say about assumptions, by wildflowers we're referring to the brightly coloured flowers that are planted next to the carriageway currently, and not the wildness, trying to use different terminology here, that where effectively the grass hasn't been cut at the back of some of the verges, or are we discussing both?
I think we're discussing both, but Mariko, I think that's one for you.
I mean, so that's the difficulty. When you say wildflower, a lot of people take that to mean the sort of colourful annual mixes that get splashed around in newspapers and on TV and stuff when people say, look at this glorious meadow. But that's not what a wildflower meadow actually looks like. You know, things like poppies and cornflowers and things, you don't get those growing in meadows. You get them, you know, they're annuals. They'll come up when there's bare ground, and that's the kind of thing that's been sown in the colourful mixes. I think we've discussed the sort of hybrid approach. So looking where the existing flora, the existing sort of grassland areas are suitable for recreating sort of real native wildflower meadows that will look good and provide for biodiversity, recreating those in those places. But then there's the potential hybrid option of where the sort of existing flora, the grassland, you know, there's not going to be suitable for recreating sort of native grassland, to come up with a kind of hybrid approach where, you know, we can inject a bit more colour because it's not going to get terribly good anyway in terms of biodiversity. So we might as well make it look good and not worry too much about the sort of biodiversity benefits, if you see what I mean. Okay.
So this is the boring contractual stuff. So we have a contract where we are cutting X number of cuts a year on Dorset Council verges. Will we lose that income stream if effectively we're letting them go back to wilderness because we're no longer cutting? Why would Dorset Council still be paying us?
That level of detail will be included in the policy. Graham hasn't covered that off, but obviously there will still be an element of maintenance that's required on those verges. It's not that we just leave it completely alone. There'll still be the need for the front section of the verges to be cut and manicured. There'll still be the need to maintain an effective maintenance cycle, because it still needs to be looked after, but it needs to be managed and looked after in a different way to it's currently looked after.
Yeah, okay, but there is a possibility we could lose some income.
There is a possibility, but again, Graham's been quite clear that, you know, the priority, or certainly Dorset Council's priority, this is not about saving money or cutting budgets. This is about changing the way we look at how we manage biodiversity across the county.
I'm assuming that a wildness area is easier and less time, man hours involved with that than mowing the grass every couple of weeks. Please correct me if I'm wrong. What is the kind of costs? You know, we're also going to need to build a budget to go alongside this policy for the actual planted wildflowers in air quotes, because obviously Mike and the guys are going to need to prepare that land, plant it. There's a cost for the seeds, etc. Do we have any indication on what that could possibly be? Or can that be built alongside the draft policy so that we can assess the ongoing effect on the revenue budget, please?
Yeah,
I would suggest that approach is get all those kinds of questions into Bree, and then between her, Mariko and Mike, we come up with that. So when that information is brought together, that comes back with whatever you're going to bring back, whatever Bree brings back to the committee meeting, that we decide then on all those questions that can't be answered right now.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. That's why I just wanted to flag it.
No, it's great to flag it up, and I would suggest to all members and all members of the council, full stop, that they get any questions like that into Bree, so that can all be brought together without then sitting down at the next meeting and one or two people asking those questions. So
yeah, it is a project that will develop over time, and there's so many considerations that have to be thought through, but we have to start somewhere, and it's starting with getting your agreement in principle for us to develop this project further.
Okay, those are sort of my questions. I now have some comments and feedbacks from someone who is not very green-fingered, as I know this committee has discussed in the past. I will admit I was a sceptic about Dorset Council's plan to rewild many verges, and I have been completely won over. I've changed my mind, because after a few years, the grass is no longer 8 foot high and is actually bedding down with some nice flowers, and someone who drives around Blandford bypass every day, is actually a lot prettier than it used to be. So I'm actually a massive fan of the rewilding now, and I'm eating humble pie, which I don't mind admitting when I was wrong. The wildflowers in air quotes, the ones we plant, are very nice. They can be a little garish, I must admit. But to me, with the trial areas are inappropriate. In some cases, it breaking up the manicured look to me doesn't make much logical sense. It also, in some cases, can be a little bit of interfering with the sight lines for junctions. My concern that is the byproduct of my opinion on their locations means that they would have to therefore go where I would envisage the rewilding to be, i.e. behind a manicured strip or manicured area. So I may be suggesting that actually we just go for the rewilding in some places and maybe do away with the not so wild flowers that we're planting. But those are sort of my comments. And obviously and what we've redone with the loops that go round the back of the planted beds on the Royal Chase roundabout looks an awful lot better, because obviously those flower beds have been completely lost, and I hope that will be maintained. The only other last comment that I'd like to have considered, for example, it's about slide 4 or 5 of the slide deck that was on the appendix. There are some places, particularly around like Maple Close, etc., where there's little like patches of grass, which I imagine a lot of children use for kicking a football around, and etc. Can we be very careful that those very small, micro, informal parks don't end up being wildflower or rewilding areas? Just because I think we're going to have we'll have a lot of complaints from upset parents and children. Because we've taken that resource away from them, especially when we want to be encouraging it. But excellent. Glad it's coming to a head now. Well done.
Great. Virginia, you've got your hand up. Question there.
Yes, so I do have a question, which is, I mean, looking at zone 1 as an example, all these areas, so they're all to be, is it wildflower only? When I think of all the kind of shrubs that could be planted and so on and so forth, I mean, when it says manicured wildflower hybrid, could you just sort of expand a little bit on that?
Mariko,
Sure.
is that one? Probably for
Mariko, do you want to expand, or would you like me to?
Well, I mean, in terms of verges, I mean, the reason they are verges often is because they're sort of, it's desirable to keep them relatively open, I guess. So, I mean, we haven't been talking about tree planting, and the thing is, a lot of, I mean, yeah, I guess it's something that could be looked at, but I mean, you know, there's a reason that they're already cut short, I think, and I assume that's because they're not sort of wanting to be planted up. And yeah, I don't know if that's,
I think it's a maintenance and a time issue from wildflowers come rewilded to keeping trees and small shrubs, etc., in a condition where they don't get in the way, but they are visually appealing. So that's the balance that we've got to set.
yeah.
So I think my reading of this item is that it is rewilding and wildflower mix. We're not talking about trees, shrubs, or any other kind of vegetation at the moment.
So I appreciate that we're not talking about that, because obviously it's not in here, but I'm just a little surprised that looking at all these areas that have been identified, are we saying that wildflowers alone are the best thing for these areas, are the most, I mean, do we have to sacrifice a visual amenity of, I mean, because some shrubs just take care of themselves. I mean, it's not as if everything has to be looked after. So
I think this is
you know,
probably
maybe
a question.
I'm going into too much detail here. I mean, it's just like the Grosvenor Bank is a particular bête noire for me because it looks awful. The planting is just, I don't understand it at all. It just looks grim. And so I hope that it's not just going to stay like that and then have wildflowers around those strange scrubby bits of hedging that I just don't understand what they're doing there. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a bit more thought behind how the overall thing is going to look, and that it's not just about wildflowers, because surely, you know, biodiversity includes all kinds of plants.
Yeah, that's something that we need to feed into BRIE, and so that comes out. That kind of information is noted for when we go forward, because the wildflowers and the rewilding is one thing. We can bring as a separate item any areas that members think could do with a facelift, if you like. If what I understand from what you're saying is, let's make it visually appealing, but let's keep it separate from wildflowers, but keep the two thought processes going forward at the same time. BRIE.
Just to come in at that point, Open Spaces Group and the Tree Group have said, you know, in areas that they'll be assisting, if there are any options for tree planting or hedge planting, then to bring those into the mix for a wider discussion. So this is a wildflower plan, but as the volunteers go out from these respective groups, if there is another opportunity, then that could be part of that wider picture consideration.
Okay. Do any other members have any other questions? Phil?
Yeah, last year I was involved in about half an acre of meadow where we had bright seeds involved, and they came along and they advised, and the existing planting was killed back and the land graded and spread with wildflower mix that they recommended. We had a passable display of flowers and plants, and assortment of wildflowers came up last year. At the end of the year, we waited for them all to seed and drop, and it was not suitable for cutting back with the ride-on mower, which meant it had to be all trimmed with a mechanical trimmer and gathered up and the surplus removed so that it wouldn't, because as I understand it, when it breaks down, it then the goodness, if you like, actually is bad for the wildflower seeds. Cleared all that away. What's come up this year? Bluntly, we might as well have wasted our time. It's totally unacceptable it doesn't look like a wildflower meadow. It doesn't appear anything that was planted last year, that flowered last year, has actually come back up again this year. So it's I love the wildflower experiments that have been tried out other places, as Piers has said. Now, so that's that bit. So I'm interested and would like to see it. I'm concerned a little bit because having spent several days with the petrol strimmer cutting back all this stuff, I'm concerned that Mike Wakely and co need to have the right equipment, because we hadn't got a meadow cutter that would actually cut and gather up this stuff. It then has to be moved. It then has to be put somewhere, and we don't actually, to my knowledge, have anywhere that we can form a giant compost heap unless St Mary's is able to provide a suitable venue, which may be possible because after it's Dorset County. So I would put those 2 points.
And they have biodigester there as well, so that will the bio feed fuel plant. So yes, points taken. I guess, Mariko, it all comes down to what you plant in the first place, as to the maintenance and the schedule of how you're going to dispose of it, rewild it every year. So
yeah, so I mean, we discussed this with Graham Stanley, because they do cut and collect, all the verges around Blandford. Many of the Dorset Council verges that they manage now are all managed with cut and collect, and they do, sensibly dispose of the clippings. So, I mean, as Graham said, not many people realise that in the middle of the Ivy Cross roundabout, there's a great big compost heap. So, there are options for doing that, and you just need the right approach, the right kit.
So right kit, that's down to us. We were having a conversation, Bree, earlier today about the options to get a bolt-on part for the Kubota mower that will allow us to gather up and transport safely these the clippings. So Mike's obviously aware of the equipment that is needed. So he, Mariko and Bree in conjunction can get those things, get all the threads together and make sure that we're planting the right stuff. We're able to maintain it the correct way to prevent the problems that Phil has raised, and therefore do a good job, an end-to-end job, rather than just one bit bite sizes at a time. John.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say, first of all, that I'm wholeheartedly in support of the principle, but there would be caveats such as the budget working out sensibly and the feasibility of the grounds team and all the other things that you're talking about. So I would support it subject to those caveats. The one point I would just pick up on when Virginia was talking about could there be other things than just flowers, there's going to be an aspect of road safety involved here. If you start having trees growing close to the road, the highway people won't be happy. So it just makes me think, are the highways people going to be involved from at the beginning, or will the plan be just presented to them at the end? Because their acceptance of it is going to be essential.
I think Graham Stanley, in conjunction with Bree, can make sure that we do things the right way, because Dorset aren't going to let us do anything that puts safety at risk. And I quite agree with you, John. That's one thing that we've got to make sure of, is that whatever we do it safely. We have that ethos anyway, but it's worth pointing it out and making sure that in the plan that does come back, we have addressed that. So that's something that just needs a couple of lines to say that we are doing what we need to do on the grounds of safety. So unless anybody else has got any other questions, is anybody prepared to make a proposal that we accept the recommendations as they are? Or if not, I will.
Yes, I've not got a form of words ready, but I would certainly be prepared to support in principle the proposal that this project goes ahead. And
I think we've got a form of words actually in the recommendation itself, that the committee considers the options as outlined in sections 9.1.2 to 9.1.9 and endorses the plan as referenced in 9.1.12 to 9.1.16, and agrees to proceed with the developing of the content for a detailed action plan to include development of the long-term wildflower policy for Shaftesbury. And the second recommendation is that we delegate the next steps of the town clerk to manage under the scheme of delegation.
Yeah, I mean, I would be happier if I saw just the caveat that subject to feasibility and budgetary constraints or something like that. I'd hate it to take off and then we think, crumbs, we can't afford it. I don't know.
No, we take the steps, and the next step is that it comes back to us as a roads committee with detailed proposals. So it's not this is a feasibility study in essence.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to propose this.
You propose. Do I have a seconder then for that? Piers?
I was about to say I'm happy to support what's there, but I would suggest that we also request a business plan for the funding, to come alongside that.
Yeah,
and specifically put that in the resolution because that is important.
Okay. John, are you happy to accept that amendment?
Yes, okay. I mean, I think that's something that will come out anyway, but yes.
Delegates the next steps of the town clerk to manage under the scheme of delegation and comes back to this committee with a detailed project plan to include budgetary and safety concerns.
Yep, yeah, that answers my queries. Yep.
Excellent. So you're proposing, Piers, are you seconding then?
Yeah, more than happy to.
All those in favour, please. Show me in favour as well. I think that's.
Have you got George's vote?
Have we? George?
Yeah, I'm in favour of that.
In favour, thank you.
In favour of that.
Unanimous.
Yep, 6. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariko.
Yeah.
If you wish to disappear now so you don't have to sit through the rest of the committee meeting, you're more than welcome to. I'm sure there's a couple of members here who would want to join you, but we can't. So
thank you very much
for
for
your
having me.
input.
Thank you.
Okay, so we move back to the agenda, then we will go to item 4, I think.
Sorry, Tim, can you just reflect back on the minutes? I'm not sure that you actually voted through the minutes from
I'm sorry. Okay, yes, you're correct. So
the 8th of June.
8th of June. So that is item 3. Do I have anybody? John?
I've had a look at them. I can't see anything wrong. I propose we adopt them.
Well, if they're good enough for you, then. Is that a seconder, Jan? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. George? Piers?
Yeah, more than happy with them.
Thank you.
George?
Gone into the land that the internet forgot.
Yeah, no, fine.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to keep on mute.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Officer reports, item 4. So reports. Do you want to speak to any of these, Bree, or shall we just take them as, unless any other members have got questions? I do have an item that I do need to speak to, but we'll take them one by one. 4.2.1 Castle Hill. Officers have received advice from Dorset Council Highways stating there is no suitable location for installing the signage to Castle Hill in the areas suggested. So the area will be brought into discussion relating to the National Navigational Signage Project, which is the project that we are looking across the whole of the town to increase and to replace signage. So unless any members have got any comments to that, that can go into that project. Phil, sorry, I didn't see your hand there.
There used to be signage attracting people in. There's a sort of raised bank on the right as you the path as you walk into Castle Hill at that point, and there always used to be a sign on there. So I can't see why it's on our own soil. We could put a sign in saying exactly that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that can be brought into the whole signage project.
Maybe if you come and see a Glastonbury tour from Shaftesbury, something like that.
Indeed. Virginia.
Forgive me, but I thought it was to the east of Castle Hill, so it's not where there is already a sign and there is a bank next to it, which is right at the top of St John's Hill and the corner of Bimport. It's where the access is opposite Magdalen Lane.
Yes.
That scrubby, little access point that doesn't have any, and there is no clear place to put anything there unless we could put something on the pavement on the other side of the road, or indeed we could engage with the owner of that house that's on the corner of the lane and see if we could put
next
something.
To the ambulance station.
Sorry?
Next to the ambulance station,
yes,
or the other side?
If we could put something on the side of that house there.
Yeah.
We've always had signs on the side of it. There was the classic one, but do not allow dogs to foul the green, pedestrians only. It was a classic one on the side there. So we've got a principle established.
Yeah, I can imagine why it's not still there.
We can bring all this into the signage project. Yeah, if we can do it sooner rather than later, great, because let's anticipate the tourist rush. So that's actions from the meeting held on the 8th of June. We've now got 4.3.1 wildflowers, that's been covered. 4.3.2 access from the Persimmons development to Wincoln Park, and we are awaiting responses from Persimmons and Dorset Council on that one.
Chairman, can I suggest you don't read them all out?
Right, okay.
Because I'm sure everyone's read their papers.
I've got something to say to 4.3.10.
Would you like to? And then I've got a question for the.
Okay. 4.3.7 and 4.3.10. I met with Adam Steele from the Highways Department this morning regarding the pedestrian signage on St John's Hill that was brought to our attention by Virginia and various others. He is going to take it back to the group that looks at the safety and the signage from Dorset Highways to see whether we can put anything in that will alert motorists turning round that sharp left-hand bend at the top of Bimport that there will be, or there may be, pedestrians in the road. Alongside that, we ought to look at maybe diverting the pedestrians down Love Lane and then cross Bimport. The reason being that there is more sight lines, and it's appreciated that there are no pavements on the two sides of Bimport where it narrows, but at least there is a lot more visibility there. So that's something that we can consider when we get some feedback from Dorset Highways as to what their suggestions would be. But Adam Steele did take some photographs. He will take it back to the Highways Department to see whether there is any precedent set in other places in Dorset. And also added to that, the permanent 7.5 ton weight limit signs for St John's Hill are getting to fruition now. So there is a good chance that the TRO will come forward very soon, so that advisory ban on HGVs becomes a permanent and recognised regulation ban. John.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, are you saying that they are missing out the traffic survey? Because the last thing I heard is they had to survey it to see whether it was going to be worthwhile. Has that been either replaced
for the 7.5 ton weight limit?
Yeah.
my understanding is that a TRO, the process of starting that TRO is now in progress, so that it, by the very nature of that process, will include consultation.
Yes, it's not so much consultation as a traffic survey they said they needed. I mean,
Well, that comes as part of it. They have to do that as part of the TRO. So yes, that will be done.
Right.
But the TRO process has been now started.
Okay, that's good. Do they don't accept all the photographs that Peter Schuler's been sending them for the last 5 years?
I'm sure that actually it features a lot in their deliberations.
It certainly should. Okay.
Yeah, it should, absolutely, it should do.
Thank you, Tim.
Right. Well, the park walk access from Love Lane, that's in progress. Those kissing gates, or the how we get people between those two thoroughfares, will come back to us for the 14th of September. So that's something to consider. Any other members have any other questions about what's on there other than Piers?
I just have an observation more than anything, Chair. It's the list of action points outstanding is quite long.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just conscious that we either need to manage the workload going into the office, or find out what we can do to assist, because there's no point in just putting more work on top of the office if they're struggling, and the grounds crew. So that list needs to be shorter, I think, by next month, or we need to start seeing what we can do to support the office. But there's a lot of stuff that's in progress.
Point taken. That's something that if you could feed that back in.
Outstanding.
And just make sure that there aren't any sticking points, and that also that you aren't being overloaded, not you, but the office team aren't being overloaded with stuff that shows no sign of action at all. So thank you, Piers. That's a good point.
Tim, the whole point of this list is that George particularly asked for it because of a whole lot of things which are projects which have intermittent need to for them to be got on with and move forward with. And the issue was to make sure that we had them so we didn't forget them, which is what's been happening in the past. So this is perfect. It reminds us things, what's in hand, what isn't in hand, what's slipping. It's nothing to do with what the office can cope with. The office can cope with a lot more than this. The problem is the office is being burdened with stupid questions and freedom of information requests. And that's taking up so much of their time. And I think that's what we ought to be working on. And this list is what we should be focusing on as a group. This is brilliant.
Good, thank you. Right, so the notes, we can receive the reports, unless anybody has got any more questions. Okay, so can I have a proposal that we accept the report and move on? Thank you, John. Seconder, please.
Tim, can I just ask what's happening about Jubilee railings? Because we've
got that further on in the agenda, Phil.
Apologies.
That's on tonight.
Item 8, I think.
In favour.
Okay. In favour, thank you. That's a seconder, and in favour. All those in favour of receiving the reports? Yes. Yes.
Sorry, Tim, I didn't catch the person that seconded.
George was in favour, so I'm taking that as is seconding John's proposal.
Can you confirm that, please, George?
George?
Yes.
Thank you. Piers? We seem to have lost.
Yes, Chair, yeah.
Thank you. Right, so that's everyone in favour. Okay, moving on to item 5, Gold Hill Sycamore clearance. The works have been recommended to be carried out on Town Council owned trees behind a couple of the properties along Gold Hill. Is there any update that you need to give to this, Bree?
Yes, since producing the report, the estimate has been received from Dorset Council to the sum of £1,410.20. If I can just draw you to section 5.4, the implication, the tree work budget year to date actual 595. If the committee wants to apply the 1400, clearly we haven't got any forward understanding of what the constraints are going to be on that budget line for the rest of this year. But to caveat that, you can see in bold the total grounds centre budget line has got an annual budget of 47. So there may be a requirement to overspend on that line. There may be a requirement to bring money in from reserves, but just to alert that that's quite a big percentage of that full year budget. Well, it's going to be about just over 25%. So that's a lot on one project. So the committee might want to consider that when making that decision about the recommendation.
Right. Piers, you had your hand up first.
If it's been suggested that it be done, that's fine. It really should have been a delegated decision, as far as I'm concerned. Just as feedback for the office.
Yeah. Are you making a proposal that we do it?
Can I make a proposal that is delegated and the clerk does as she feels fit? Because this is a bit inconsequential.
Yeah, you could always, yes, I'd take that as a proposal. So, John?
I'm assuming we can't say no. So I will second it.
Thank you. We can, but we won't. It would be prudent not to, I think. So, okay, so we have a proposer and a seconder, unless anybody.
In favour.
Was that I want to make a point, Phil, or you?
In favour.
In favour, thank you. All those, lovely. Thank you. That's 100%. Okay, moving on to item 6, barbecues policy. It's a very sensible policy, and unless anybody has got any queries or changes that they wish to make to that policy, I would suggest that we take a vote on that straight away. But John, do you have any? Have you read through the policy? Have you got any changes or observations to make on it?
A very minor one. I notice in the explanation in the background, mention is made of the fact that too much carbon in the soil is going to interfere with carbon dating antiquities. That not be one of the bullet points in the reasons for, within the actual policy itself, saying this is one of the reasons why you're bringing it in? It's not mentioned. I mean, there's all sorts of fire risk and litter and all the rest of it, but it looks to me a minor point, but significant.
I think that does make a good point, yes.
Archaeologists is not going to confuse an old barbecue with historic remains. This is ridiculous. And if they are there, they're right on the surface of the grass. I've been along there of an evening and watched people quite happily doing their little barbecues. They're not interfering with anybody. They're not causing any particular damage or so on. But what we do need is the ability that they can dispose of them safely. So I would rather tackle it that way around. What we don't want is them chucking them over the railings.
I think we have had a couple of fires. I think the Wareham Forest fire was possibly due to barbecues being used. I think people have got to be a lot more sensible in the way that they do interact in public spaces. But Piers, go on.
Can I just seek some advice from the Deputy Clerk, in that this obviously is a Dorset Council campaign and both yourself and I are Dorset councillors. And I imagine, without putting words in your mouth, we both agree with this fantastic campaign that, as you rightly point out, is the byproduct of the horrible fires that we saw last year around Wareham Forest. Are we allowed to take part, Bree, or should we abstain?
I would say that you're absolutely fine to take part.
I feel that this is what we are doing for our local community, but looking wider, as to why we are doing it. I
Yeah.
don't think there is a conflict of interest here
No.
myself, but it's up to you.
Well,
If you wish
I
to.
fully support the campaign. You know, at the end of the day, this is about
Right.
making sure that Mike, his team, Claire and her team have the ability to say to people, you know, look, you know, you need to put the barbecue out because it is a fire risk. There are other ways to do it, and we've seen it takes one house to burn down for this policy to be worth every moment that we've discussed it.
But there's
Andy,
a huge difference.
hold on, wait a minute. Andy was indicating next. I will.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of places, a lot of campsites have policies in place not to allow the use of disposable barbecues for exactly these reasons. I just a sort of couple of thoughts. It's going to apply to all of Shaftesbury Town Council land, in which case we're going to have to put up signs on each bit of that land to advise people that disposable barbecues aren't acceptable or are not allowed. And then there's the thorny old question of how do we enforce it?
Relevant points. Phil, and then I think...
Yeah, I can fully appreciate that if you're in Wareham Forest and it's tinder dry, a barbecue is absolute madness. But Park Walk and Castle Hill are manicured grass, and we're not proposing that those go wild. It's completely safe to have your barbecue there because there's nothing tinder dry material to actually have a fire. So I would suggest that this policy has its locations, but I'm not sure that Castle Hill is one of them.
Okay. So John, were you proposing in that we adopt?
I would be quite happy to. I think that we do need to have control over it because I accept what Phil says about not being able to set fire to Castle Hill itself, but there's plenty of shrub and stuff over the fence when it do toss it over there, as people do. I mean, that's how these fires start. So
or the wind blows it. Yeah.
I think we need it, and whether yes, okay, the enforcement is easier said than done, but if the grounds team have the ruling behind them to be able to approach people if they happen to witness them using one, then I think that's as much as we can hope to do. You can't have a patrol, but you can have a principle, and I would support that. So yes, I'll support the policy.
Right. I'll look for a second, and then Bree's got a comment after that. Is there a seconder to Jan? Thank you. Bree, you've got one more.
Yeah, I just wanted to cover off the main challenge of introducing the policy around the issue of enforcement, because while enforcement can be difficult, having a clear policy means that there's a clear and consistent message from Shaftesbury Town Council that can be cited by staff working and the local police officers or PCSOs, and it really greatly helps them with enforcing the policy and provides the backing from Shaftesbury Town Council to approach members of the public who are not adhering to or aware of the rules.
Okay.
So it would help that joined up messaging.
Yes, yeah, thank you. We have a proposer, we have a seconder that we accept this policy. So all those in favour, please. One, we've got Jean, myself, John,
Yeah.
George, Piers. All those against? Phil against, so that is carried, and that's everyone, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7, St James Park play area. I hope everybody has had a chance to read the Make Space for Girls summary. I had a conversation with Virginia earlier, and she said that she had just read it and found it very informative, and then I got to that bit and I read it and I see that as very informative as well. We could, if we were being closed-minded and not thinking, just replace like with like for all the play equipment in St James. But we have a chance, now we know we have identified that this we need to do something there. We have a chance to be a bit more creative, a bit more innovative. And when we think that we could make St James Play Park, St James Park itself, and taking into account the railings, a signature project for Shaftesbury to run alongside Gold Hill as a destination to come to, we've got the chance to do the best thing that we can for the young people of this town. And after reading that Make Space for Girls, we need to take into account how and why and when our young people will use this. So I hope we've all had a chance to digest what was given us as some of the background information. So Phil, were you indicating to speak there, or?
In terms of the quotes for equipment, I could open one which then had a complete directory of all the equipment they made and a quoted list. Well, I was not going to work my way through that lot, and the other two quotes wouldn't open. So I was really going to say no, I couldn't open it, and by the time I couldn't open those, I'm afraid I abandoned this item until we could find out some better information. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. I think we have got to come up with the solutions for ourselves rather than the manufacturers almost telling us what we can have. I think we can be far more creative. Part of the recommendation here is that we form a working group with delegation to the clerk for any small expenditure. I think possibly we need to take that a little bit and say we form a working group to look at the whole project itself, because we've got the opportunity now to, as I said earlier, to be more creative. And I think, given that we've got the quotes, yes, so we know what background information there is as to manufacturers, but we need to refine our thinking, refine our ideas, and then go back to the manufacturers. So I would suggest we look at 7.5.1b first. We look at forming that working group to inform us better on what we actually need. I don't know whether any members are happy with that synopsis. George, I think, are you wanting to say something there?
Yeah, just a quick one here. My thoughts are, maybe, does it require a working group, or can it just be a lead councillor? You know, we put a councillor in charge who's well driven, lives in the area, got a great design background, and we all know can take it on.
That's an admirable solution to that part of the recommendation. Did you have anybody in mind by any chance?
I mean, sometimes cooks of broth and all that, and we end up going round and round in circles while and end up with a half-cocked idea where if someone just grabbed it by the you-know-whats and dragged it forward, we'd probably have a much better solution.
Yeah. Well, do you have a person in mind? Because I do.
It fits to me a nice, I think it needs a woman's touch, to be perfectly honest. I think. Say your name,
George. If you've got a name in mind.
Virginia, what's your thoughts?
Yes, all right.
Yes,
seriously, I'd love to get my hands on it and get those railings sorted and come up with some good ideas and think it through, get the quotes in and put a proper proposal together for everyone to have a look at.
I think that's brilliant.
Jan.
Can I just say, as George has got a young lad, would it not be an idea to ask him what he would like to see there?
I think the background to the whole going out and getting ideas is that we listen to everybody,
right?
George's son included. But yes, I think that's a very sensible idea. We've got to listen to the people that can use it, the people who might use it, and very crucially, the people who don't use the path at the moment. And we need to find out why. That PDF that ran alongside that Make Space for Girls was an eye-opener for me. I didn't realise at all that the reason that girls don't use skate parks and play parks is because they feel it's not for them. And so we've got to do something for them just as much as the boys in the community. So I think George has made the proposal that Virginia heads up this as a lead councillor role. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second it if she's happy.
I think from what she's just said, she is happy. Yeah, I'm happy for that. And therefore, the financial details that we've got at the moment that Phil alluded to fall for the moment, pending more information and a greater consultation exercise. So, Piers.
It's mainly a question for Mike, I guess. Is any of the play equipment down there in a position where it can't be used for safety reasons, or is it all operational? Now, granted, I know it all looks very tired and is on the cusp.
At the moment, the swings are At the moment, the swings are out to use. The slide is getting to the stage where we need to have a company in to put new steps in. One or two of the other playthings are beginning to rust out. So it's unfortunately an ongoing thing throughout the whole parks in Shaftesbury. You know, it's all a matter of cost, unfortunately, and where do we start? Because this isn't the only park that needs doing.
No. Okay, does that answer your question?
Am I correct in saying that we have a replacement program drafted out so that we are abreast of what will need replacing roughly when? Yeah. Okay. In terms of the reason I was asking, Chair, was that what I didn't want us to do is spend 6 months coming up with something amazing, thus there be no equipment that's operational down there in that 6 months. But if we are just in 1 or 2 pieces out of probably about, I don't know, must be a dozen plus there, then I'm happy to go with the programme outlines. And obviously we can look to get the funding in place in the next round of budgets. But obviously I'm sure Virginia will bear that in mind while doing her work with the community.
Yeah.
I possibly would go back to George to ask whether he sees in his resolution or in his proposal that he's prepared to put a timescale on it, because I take your point, Piers, we can't hang about for too long. My thoughts are that maybe 3 months, we've got to have something in place within 3 months that we can get on with and do. So George, are you happy to take an amendment to your proposal that we set a time limit on this consultation and ideas exercise, and we say 2 months or 3 months, which gives enough time for work to be done but doesn't allow the project to drag on any longer than it has to? Are you there, George?
Just bear in mind that August is going to be a disaster this year with everybody going away on holiday, so it's going to be very difficult. There's a bit less resource in the office because we're losing Zoe sometime fairly soon, I would have thought.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't put too much undue pressure on them. We know we've got large workloads and other things we're delivering at the same time. So, you know, Bree's got football club, she's got car park, she's got a mountain of other things. And I think if we go, got to be done by the 1st of September or something like that, that's possibly unrealistic. And we'll just end up with something that Virginia's not happy with. I think if I could put it this politely, I think she'll drive it just dandy, and I don't think there'll be too much time wasted.
Virginia's got her hand up there.
Yes, I just thank you, George. Thanks for that. I just wanted to say that, You know, there's, you know, less than 2 weeks until the end of term, or, you know, so I do want to go and talk to school children, and it is going to be easier to do it if I can try and access them in and around the school hours and engage with their teachers to kind of get them on board, trying to kind of find school children and do an appropriate consultation during the course of August when they're here and there and everywhere isn't really going to work. So I wouldn't want to be stuck to a 2-month deadline. I don't think that's really feasible. Certainly I would aim to have quite a lot to come back to you with for the beginning of September, but not a fully finished suggestion.
Okay.
Tim, just to come in at that point, as referenced in the papers, Alex and Claire have already started to really engage with the secondary school on youth council. So, you know, this is potentially an opportunity for the youth council to get involved with as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And they've got their
And
they've got their network of people within the school that they can use to engage with, to get the wider ideas collated for us.
Well, let's take the vote on, firstly, on 7.5.1b, that we form not a working group, but we put forward a lead councillor, that councillor being Virginia, to head up a consultation exercise. We've had a proposer and a seconder, so all those in favour. Piers, we've got myself, Jan,
Yes,
George, and Phil. So that's you've got the job there, Virginia. You might come to regret it, but there we are. So do we actually need to take on 7.5.1a, Bree?
Sorry, let me just.
No, that's an A or B, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
so we've gone for B.
Yeah, I think you've gone for B, but I think it's still important to build in that delegation to the town clerk, because it means that we can then continue with developing that project outside of the committee with Virginia as the lead councillor. And it means then every time we need to bring something back, we avoid the need to do that if it's delegated down. Yeah. So it just gives us that bit more flexibility.
Well, that delegation is built into 7.5.1b, so forms a working group or forms a lead councillor with delegation to the clerk for any small expenditure. So
yeah, and I think we just probably need to link in with members of the Rose Committee as well. So just combining the two words together, just to make it more rock solid. So we
actually voted on B, but can you suggest a form of words then that we do need to put?
The council forms a working group with delegation to the clerk in consultation with the Rose Committee
and lead
to
member
undertake the engagement. So
I propose that then. So if you can come up with that form of words. We have a seconder for that, John, and all those in favour of that resolution.
Chairman, I have a question.
Oh, go on, Piers. Yeah.
My understanding was that we were delegating obviously the decision-making power to the clerk, but within consultation with the lead member. And therefore there isn't a need for an advisory committee.
There is a need for the Rose Committee, not an advisory committee. Yeah, no, that point taken. So, okay, we'll let that lie where it is. I think then, yes, that's a good point, Piers. So,
but including the lead councillor.
Yes.
Sorry, can we confirm what's been? I don't want to seem like an old man who's getting all confused. But I'm an old man who's all confused now.
Okay, so we delegate to the town clerk into consultation with lead member and members of the Rose Committee to undertake the consultation exercise and come up with a design solution.
Correct.
That wasn't my wording.
We voted on yours a moment ago. We're now there is a second resolution then being voted on, George.
I know I've been out in the sun all day, but you've confused what sits out of me.
You're driving. Concentrate on the road, not on us for a moment.
I am.
Good.
That's easy. It's you that's causing me grief.
So we do have a
What?
second resolution. I'll propose. John, are you happy to second? Yes, and all those in favour of that second resolution, just to tighten up as per Piers' question. Those in favour. Got Jean, myself, John, Piers.
Bill looks confused.
I'm completely confused of what on earth we're talking about. Like Piers, I don't know how we can vote when they've got so many resolutions. I think I'm trying to focus on what we're talking about, but I'm completely lost. I'm sorry.
Do you want to go back?
I'm abstaining because I'm confused.
Please, yes, just for clarity, Bree.
Okay, so in terms of the recommendation that's on the papers, that you did have two choices, but you voted on 5.1.
7.5.1b.
But instead of forming the working group, you have essentially delegated to the town clerk in consultation with the lead councillor and the Rose Committee.
Right, so does that clear the confusion?
Yeah.
I'll go back to my previous point. What is the difference between what we voted on that I suggested and what we're now voting on?
I think that from my perspective, 5.1.b was clearing up the confusion about the working group, and that it's the lead councillor rather than the working group.
And then that lead councillor works with the Rose Committee and the delegated power of the clerk.
Correct.
So that it's the second resolution.
So yeah, and this is about undertaking that collection of engagement throughout the summer period.
Okay, we clear? All those in favour, please show. Thank you.
I'll abstain.
Okay, everyone but George. Lovely, thank you.
And I didn't get Piers's vote.
He voted in favour.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Jubilee railings. I think this is one now that we have.
It's all part of
Sorry?
Virginia's remit, isn't it now?
Exactly.
It's all
Yeah.
part of Virginia's remit because it's the whole strategic plan.
Yeah.
Just to give a point of clarity, Tim, if I may.
Please, yeah, please do.
When the Rose Committee met in February, we were talking about moving forward with improving the railings, as discussed in that meeting. A resolution was passed earlier this year that surplus funds from the allotment would be used to support this project.
Mm-hmm.
As of today, it is looking like the A30 allotments is going to be in the region of about £20,000 underspent against the budget that was allocated.
Okay.
So worth mentioning where we're at with that point.
So that really the principle that the railings have some work done on them is not up for discussion tonight. It's just that the money can now come from that underspend on the allotments project. Clear? Piers?
I should have emailed this in advance, and apologies for not doing so. Am I correct in saying we already designed this a few years ago, didn't we? And we were if my memory serves me correct, it must be about 2 years ago now. We wanted to just hold off for a few months while we signed off the street furniture design palette to ensure that our first thing, piece of street furniture we were going to do, made sure it was compliant with the policy we were just about to sign off. Why are we back at step one? Or was there an issue with the finance, something like that? Can someone help me out here, please?
Bree. Oh God, I've got Phil then, John.
So my understanding is that was absolutely the case, Piers. For some reason, the project stalled, and I can't give you an answer on why that was. There was definitely some work that was undertaken with the design guide, which was linked into the neighbourhood plan. We've also subsequently had the branding project move forward as well. So I think it was a big discussion at the early part of the year where it was brought back onto the strategic plan, and I think now it's about just regrouping as to where we're at, and essentially asking the committee for that steer on moving forward. In terms,
Bree, do you want me to answer that question?
You can if you want, yes.
So it was delayed, if my memory serves me right, on two reasons. One, you're right with the bins, and the bins were then delayed because actually we wanted to do the whole of the town branding so that all communications and everything has a common theme that runs through it, which everybody has bought into, and now the branding is finished. So the branding can then have some input into the look and style of the railings. And secondly, the person that we went with was a blacksmith type guy who was very, very good, but if my memory serves me right, he wouldn't give a quote. He was more on an hourly rate. Therefore, it was a bit open-ended. So I don't think the council was overly keen on signing a blank check.
Mm. And I think that blacksmith was certainly a number of years ago, four years plus or so.
Phil, then John.
Yeah, the last thing I discussed was George wanted quite rightly to get this branding, and the idea was that we would have some sort of railing which was of a family link with the railing on Gold Hill. And I gave it some thought and did a simple design for the same sort of posts, the same sort of rail, but with a little bracket which just ran out and up from the post, which enabled the post to be in the grass alongside the steps and the rail where it needed to be over the edge of the path. The illustration of the two railing, or if not three railing from Metal Store is completely wrong. I would hope that nobody's seriously thinking that that is suitable for Gold Hill railings or even Jubilee Steps railings. And painting galvanized rail is just a complete waste of time. The paint will flake off in no time. It'll immediately start to look bad and untidy, and we'll never want to maintain it. So if we either do nothing, or can I suggest we ought to get my proposed railing considered, because that hasn't been put forward on the agenda. Sorry, I'm a bit upset that it hasn't been.
Okay, point taken. John.
Yes, if I can clarify what sparked all of this off, it was that earlier in the year, the Jubilee railings were taken off the 5-year plan. There was a bit of a rationalisation going on, I think at the time of the 3G pitch. And I objected to it being removed. And the point that I made was, whatever the outcome of the branding, the railings in Gold Hill are not going to be replaced, because we would be lynched if we did. They're part of the scene. And my proposal was that we reproduce them as close as we could on the Jubilee steps, on the basis that therefore we don't need to wait an indeterminate amount of time for the branding to decide what is going to be a Shaftesbury style. Now, what I was hoping to happen was that one of the drawings would show something like the Gold Hill railings, because I fervently believe that that's what the Jubilee steps deserve and need. Now, if there are technical reasons why the foundations are difficult to put in, then I've been prepared to be bound by whatever the experts say. But I feel as though the target should be along the lines of Gold Hill railings, but obviously of a height and positioning suitable for the steps. I'm quite happy if Phil's proposal for a modified version is taken, although I must say I'm not quite sure, Phil, why that's necessary, because if the railings are set at the edge of the path, I appreciate that on Gold Hill, although the hill slopes down steeply, it doesn't slope across horizontally. So it's a surface that is easier to set railings in than on Jubilee steps.
Yeah.
But I would like to start with something that is going to try to emulate Gold Hill. That was my view.
The issue, John, is the railing on Gold Hill, as you run your hand up every 8 feet or 6 feet, your hand has to sort of run up over the top of the post or round the post. And you should have a continuous railing, but have the rounded top wooden posts. And if you look at the under 8.2.2, there's a nice little picture showing the steps and the path. And if you can see from that you want the railing over the edge of the steps, and that the posts can't go on the edge of the steps because it's a little lump of concrete and there's a bit of a drop. You know, to concrete it in, the post has to be beside the steps. And therefore my suggestion was that you then bring the post, out of the top of the post, you bring a cranked, like handrail bracket that supports the tubular post. So you've got the best of both worlds.
I think both Phil and John make a very good point. The continuity with Gold Hill is paramount. I think this is something that Virginia then needs to take on board when looking at her plans. She's got her hand up there.
Yes, I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to reassure everyone that in looking at that whole area, so the play area and the railings, as one homogeneous, unified vision, that of course I will be looking at Phil's design, and that yes, I agree with John that, you know, it does need to identify as closely as possible with Gold Hill. So I just wanted to reassure everyone that all those points would be taken on board and would be a starting point.
I think from the comments that are being made and from what Piers said and from what both Phil and John have said, certainly the level of detail or the quotes that we have got in the recommendation here don't fit or meet the expectation that we as a committee have. So I would very much strongly suggest that we park this and make sure, or we make sure that we take a resolution to let the design come in consultation with Phil and then feed into the plan for the overall view of St James. I don't know how members feel. If members feel happy, I would say that we have an understanding here that part of the project goes hand in hand with what will be looked at for the whole of St James, and therefore we don't need to take a separate resolution. We know that the money is there, or the money that is most likely to be there from the underspend on the allotments, and that resolution still stands. So unless any members have got any strong views, I suggest that we do not take any further action on this item tonight.
Can I just speak, Chairman, please?
Yeah, sure.
The only thing I don't want it to happen is to get kicked into the long grass again, because I feel it's been so many years since this was first raised.
Absolutely.
And when it was raised last time, a number of people contacted me to say that those railings are not fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. People who are disabled can't use them. They're not high enough. And so it's something that I mean, Virginia said she wants this whole thing wrapped up ASAP over the area. But I just want to be sure that this is not going to slip by another season.
That's a fair point. I don't think it will, given that we have taken the resolution in the item before that the whole area of St James is looked at in one piece. So unless any other members have got any input, I think we defer this item to the feedback that we get from the piece of work that Virginia is going to do for us. Thank you. Right, we'll move on then. We've done item 9. So we come on to item 10, which is the allotment grow to give scheme request. Bree, can you give us an update or enlighten us?
Yes, I'm sure that the committee will be aware of the success of the community fridge project, which is run by Open House, reaches many people and those in need across our community. The Co-op and Waitrose and Gillingham are the main supermarkets that are supporting the scheme with their fresh produce. But there is a national initiative called the Grow to Give campaign, and it's aimed at allotment holders essentially donating their surplus stock or their surplus items that they grow. So Open House are asking the committee if they would allow a donation box to be located in each of the allotments, where the allotment holders can pop in their surplus produce, which will then be collected by the community fridge team. And they've also asked if we would enable them to reach out to our allotment holders to ask them to donate to the scheme. Now, obviously, from a GDR perspective, we can't just hand out contact information. So I've asked if they can supply the information that they want us then to distribute on behalf of the Community Fridge project.
Right.
So that's in simple
Thank
terms.
you. I see this as a complete no-brainer, that we just go ahead with this. It makes
I'll
absolute
second.
sense. Thank you. So I'd propose George seconded, unless anybody's got any input. Jan, is that
No, I was
in
going to say I'm
favour?
in favour.
Yeah. All those in favour, Piers, thank you. John, Bill, thank you. At 26 minutes past 8, we have come to the end of the meeting.